in India, the word lobbying is in some ways a bad word. And I've often discussed this, and I have a couple of thoughts on this. Clearly, in any democracy, it's very legitimate for groups of individuals or entities to go and ask the government for certain things. When an NGO goes to the government and says, can you do this? It's called advocacy. When a company goes and does something, it's called lobbying. Yes, of course, when the NGO asks for something, it's assumed to be in the public interest, and when the company is going and doing that, it's assumed to be for the private interest. But the bottom line is, it's very legitimate to go and ask the government for things that you want. The problem in India is that we've made it all very secret, and that's the cause for the problem. Perhaps if there's an open recognition that lobbying of any sort is legitimate in a democracy, all we need is make it much more transparent. So at least we can track who's meeting whom, asking for what, and if there are in quid pro quos in terms of money or other favors exchanged, I think it would be very useful for us to think about that within India as we progress on lots of these things that we've been discussing so far. The second thought that comes to mind is what's been going on in India over the last few months with the general elections coming up in the next 3 months in India, and state elections that happened a couple of months ago, and the Aam Aadmi Party and the way it has been raising funds from individuals in the thousands. And that has set off an interesting dialogue in the political circles in India and amongst all of us. The mainstream political parties so far seem to have somehow believed that people like us cannot contribute or will not contribute to political parties. The Aam Aadmi Party has come and shown that it's possible. In the last 5 or 6 months, as Professor Chokar said, we've had major judgments coming in from the courts to improve our electoral systems and processes and transparency around elections. So it'll be interesting for us to see what will happen in the next 3 or 4 months in the general elections, not so much about the outcome of the elections themselves, but how will political parties adapt to what I think is a new emerging reality in how political parties need to engage with citizens going forward. Within Omidyar network, we had, we've been thinking about governance as a major sort of aspect of work, and we've always found that, however we approach the problem, just scalability has come in 2 forms, very broadly speaking. One, of course, is policy interventions, as we've heard so far, where we've had policy victories, whether it's, making sure that people with a conviction cannot continue in political office, or many other fronts. And the other, as we've heard again, is the intervention of technology as the enabler. And as in some ways, when the traditional systems, whether it's newspapers in Ghana that don't report on corruption cases, where technology can break that barrier and reach directly to the people, or in the case of ADR or Janaagraha, where technology is being used in so many different ways to enhance the engagement of citizens in the democratic process, I think these are huge opportunities for us in both policy and technology. And as we are seeing right now, in different contexts, both these levers for massive change are being used. And we can only hope that over the next few months we will see more of this in India. One last comment about the Right to Information Act and the Open Government Partnership, which Ellen alluded to. I think one of the things, as Danny Kaufman said, Ellen repeated, transparency is useful but not a sufficient, necessary but not sufficient condition for a lot of what we need to do. And I think what we can take away from the organizations that are putting together this conference and participants from around the world here is it's not just about transparency they're fighting for. They're saying let's take this in ways that people can use the data on a regular basis to be able to address the problems that we all face, whether it's corruption at the retail level, and I understand there's a report being released tomorrow on retail corruption in India in 3 cities, or the work that ADR is doing or Sunlight is doing in the US. These are all cases where citizens can see the data and say, look, oh, there's a problem here, and it's not just about open data for open data's sake.